and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right, folks, we got to talk about some missing money. Yeah, money. Money me. Money me now. Where is the money? Where is the money, Lebowski? Where is the dineros? The money. Cash money. Well, I don't know how this could happen. Maybe all of you, and I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum. You could be a Trumper, a libertarian, hell, you could be a Biden supporter, RFK Jr. supporter, third party, independent, etc. I don't care. But someone explained to me just how in the hell you lose $6.2 billion. Here, let's find this out.
Following up from some announcements earlier this year, during the department's regular oversight of our execution of presidential drawdown authority for Ukraine, we discovered inconsistencies in equipment valuation for Ukraine. In a significant number of cases, services used replacement costs rather than net book value, thereby overestimating the value of the equipment drawn down from U.S. stocks and provided to Ukraine. Once we discovered this misvaluation, the comptroller reissued guidance on March 31st, clarifying how to value equipment in line with the financial management regulation and DoD policy to ensure we use the most accurate of accounting methods. We have confirmed that for FY23, the final calculation is $3.6 billion.
What?
And for FY22, it is $2.6 billion for a combined total of $6.2 billion. These valuation errors in no way limit or restricted the size of any of our PDAs or impacted the provision of support to Ukraine. And while the DoD retains the authority to utilize the recaptured PDA, this has no bearing on appropriated USAI or Ukraine PDA replenishment funding approved by Congress.
So what you heard there was one big word salad of, please disregard anything that's happening. Don't worry about it. $6.2 billion lost in accounting error. Isn't that fan-frickin-tastic? Losing it all. But hold on, folks. Hold on, folks. It gets a little bit worse. Now, whether you like him or you hate him, James O'Keefe recently did a sit-down interview with somebody from BlackRock. BlackRock using their assets under management to control the world. Here, let's pull up this video. Shout out to Wall Street Silver for also retweeting this. But here is a video from James O'Keefe. I think it's important that we hear every side and every perspective because, folks, when I say it's the top 1% and the corporate interests control everything, they control both parties. Nothing's going to fundamentally change. It's going to get progressively worse. So if you vote Democrat or Republican, you don't have a seat at the table, but the corporate lobby groups do. Everybody in independent media has been saying that. And more or less, occasionally, it'll be a blip on the radar. You might hear it on corporate media. Once in a blue moon. Only once. Who controls our politicians? Do you go to sleep at night thinking you're oh so fantastic Democratic or Republican lawmaker actually give a damn about you? Do you really believe in that? I mean, seriously. I mean, I know that there are some diehard Democratic and, yes, Republican Party loyalists, people who truly do believe in the neoliberal system, and that somehow when they go to work or go to sleep in the morning, screwed that up, go to sleep at night, they think that everything's fine. No, it's not fine. The top 1%ers, big money controls everything. Big money is dictating how your politicians should write legislation for you. It doesn't matter who sits in the White House. Now, again, whether or not Trump is sincere enough about it, saying he wants people to stop dying and end the war, well, it is yet to be seen. But even when confronted during his administration about why we're still in Syria, well, we're there for the oil. And who wants the oil? Hedge funds, BlackRock, the banks, the top 1%ers, everybody who is involved in finance.
Campaign financing. Yep, you can buy your candidates.
Oh, no one tell the vote blue no matter who, people. Because that means they're Democratic politicians and even Hill Dog can be bought. The way he talks about our senators, they're so cheap. Tell me, Republican voters and Democratic voters, how do you feel knowing that your senator's cheap? Cheap like a lady of the evening for a quick little fling, 10K, and they'll bark like a seal. Is the most reasonable person in the world. I want people to stop dying. I want people to stop dying. That's what Trump said. And compared to this guy, Trump's a saint. And that's frightening. That's not a good thing. That's kind of scary.
I'll give an
I'm just going to say this. Smedley Butler, former United States Marine, served in every single major combat zone in the early part of the 1900s. Smedley Butler, again, rose to the rank of general. And the fact that there aren't streets or schools named after him, because were it not for him, he whistleblowed and told our government, especially the FDR administration, that, hey, there are some business tycoons that want to do a coup and make me their dear leader who support fascist policies. Now, of course, Smedley Butler, being the Marine that he was, courageously brought this force to the American people. And as for those business tycoons, what they got was slap on the wrist. Smedley Butler, unsung hero. Here's a quote from Smedley Butler. War is a racket. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the loss in lives. And again, he goes on to say, war's a racket. It always has been. A few profit and the many pay. But there's a way to stop it. You can't end it by dismantling conferences. You can't eliminate it by peace parlays in Geneva. Well-meaning but impractical groups can't wipe it out by resolutions. It can be smashed effectively only by taking the profit out of war. Oh, Smedley Butler. You're an unsung hero. And every street should be named after you. He truly believed in the Republic. This link in the live stream chat, so that way all of you can share it and retweet it out as well. So what can we take away from this? The fact that, again, we're seeing war profiteering. We need to start calling it out. Our politicians. I want to pull up this video of RFK Jr. calling out warmongers in Washington, D.C. Now, again, RFK Jr. is running in the DNC, and I have no idea how he's going to win his primary. I do wish him all the best. Truly, the system is rigged against him. And by making this statement right now, especially in regards for calling for an anti-war movement, he's going to have to contend with his own party. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders and AOC, they're never going to do it. They're never going to call out the insider trading. They're not going to call out their fellow party leaders for being part of an establishment system. But I want to play these words from RFK Jr. because it's very rare you hear a Democrat talking like this. Now, whether he is sincere about that or not, again, anybody on a campaign trail can say things you want to hear. Far better than Marianne Williamson's statements. I'll say that.
Like teenagers playing World of Warcraft, these warmongers inside U.S. leadership draw up war games and scenarios and pretend that a nuclear war is winnable. That is a dangerous lie. It's an illusion that my uncle's defense secretary, Robert McNamara, called mass psychosis. These individuals do not appreciate what John F. Kennedy understood when he said of nuclear war, quote, all that we have built, all that we have worked for would be destroyed in the first 24 hours. Even one nuclear explosion spreads radioactivity around the world. Can you imagine the consequence of a full nuclear exchange? President Kennedy did. That's why he said, quote, above all, while defending our own vital interests, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either humiliating retreat of a nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence of the bankruptcy of our policy or a collective death wish for humanity.
Now, I want to make it very clear here. If there were to ever be an exchange where the nukes are flying, we're never going to get to this point again in technology. All these computers, these laptops, these cell phones, your McDonald's, your grab and go tacos, indoor plumbing, etc. It's never coming back. If humanity survives, it will be a shell of what it once used to be, and the survivors will envy the dead. It will be the absolute destruction of our species, and it will be how we go out. And it's pretty downright disgusting when you think about it. It is deplorable, the fact that we have politicians, especially here in the United States, humoring the fact of, oh, it's okay if a few nukes go off. Don't worry about it. We could survive it. Hell, our corporate press are talking about it too. Don't panic. War's good for business, right? Everything's crazy.
Let me say that again. Nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. The shameful fact is that for the last 20 years, the advocates of a militaristic foreign policy within the US leadership have done exactly the opposite. Their belligerent strategy of maximum confrontation extends beyond Russia to China, where the same group within our government hopes to use Taiwan as a geopolitical pawn, the same way they used Iraq and Syria and now Ukraine, to further a vain fantasy of world domination through violent confrontation. Let's leave off geopolitics for a moment and take the matter of war and peace a little deeper. President Kennedy understood that peace begins with our basic attitudes and beliefs. He spoke of the futility of passively waiting for the other side to become enlightened. We, quote, we must examine our own attitudes, he said, as individuals and as a nation, for our attitude is as essential to theirs, end quote. We should, he said, begin by looking inward. Yes, back in 1963, a politician really said that, a political leader.
Now, again, I prefer the way RFK Jr. is speaking about anti-war and the dangers of two global powers fighting in a proxy war that could eventually escalate. I prefer this over Trump's statement, but the fact that you have RFK Jr. and Donald Trump, again, I don't want to put Donald Trump in the same room as RFK Jr., but being the most reasonable individuals. And of course, then you have also Dr. Cornel West, who's running in the Green Party. Compare these three to the rest of the entire neoliberal establishment. We've got easily bought politicians, especially U.S. senators that apparently can be bought for $10,000. That's how cheap they are, who will gladly take money from the military-industrial complex and spew out the talking points of, oh, it's just fine, more funding for war. And in the previous video that I played, $6.2 billion goes missing. Will there be any accountability? Hey, let's have democracy in the chat. I know, controversial statement. Type 1 if Kit, there's going to be some accountability. $6.2 billion going missing. Somebody's going to do something, and someone's going to be held accountable, and justice will prevail. Type 2, man, no one's going to look into that. Come on, Jack. God save the Queen. No one's going to look into that.
A political leader voiced what would be considered today a spiritual maximum or a spiritual principle. Let's take up that call from 60 years ago and ask Americans, all of us, to re-examine our attitude. We have been immersed in a foreign policy discourse that is all about adversaries and threats and allies and enemies and domination. We've become addicted to comic book good versus evil narratives that erase complexity and blind us to the legitimate motives and the legitimate cultural and economic concerns and the legitimate security concerns of other peoples and other nations. We have internalized and institutionalized a reflex of violence as the response for any and all crises. Everything becomes a war. The war on drugs, the war on terror, the war on cancer, war on climate change. This way of thinking predisposes us to wage endless wars abroad, wars and coups and bombs and drones and regime change operations and support for paramilitaries and juntas and
And we could thank corporate media for contributing to that. In 2001, all of corporate media was in agreement that there were WMDs in Iraq. And thankfully, the brave forces were able to stop Saddam Hussein and his weapons of mass. Oh, wait, no. There were no WMDs. There were none found. The journalists who told those lies still have their jobs. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. The talent that told those lies on corporate media still have their jobs and have continued to build nice, robust careers for themselves. The politicians that promoted those lies, both Democrat and, yes, Republicans, built nice, robust careers for themselves. And yes, Democratic lawmakers continued on with that lie. WMDs in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction. And since then, let's talk about all the wars that have been happening. Political instability in Syria. A genocide in Yemen. Open slave trade markets in Libya? Jesus Christ. Of course, the disastrous pullout in Afghanistan. The scars run deep in Iraq still. And hey, just because we're not in Afghanistan doesn't mean we can't cause some trouble in Ukraine. Madness and insanity all around to help out war profiteering. Check out Unusual Whales on Twitter, and they'll show you just what your fantastic Democratic and Republican lawmakers are doing.
dictators. None of this has made us safer, and none of it has burnished our leadership or our moral authority. More importantly, we must ask ourselves, is this really who we are? Is this what we want to be? Is that what Americans' founders envisioned? We've then gone off on this path with a military-industrial complex, which President Eisenhower warned about a week before, or 3 days before my uncle took office, in the best speech that he ever gave, and one of the most important in history, where he warned America that if we did not take great pains to avoid it, the emerging military-industrial complex would devour our democracy. It would destroy American values from within. And my uncle knew that. He knew that speech, and he spent the 3 years, his 1,000 days in office, fighting against the rise of the military-industrial complex. After his death, we went down that path that Eisenhower predicted, and that's where we are today. And it's time now to reverse that. It's time. Thank you. As I said before, peace comes from a changed attitude. At the bottom of the war mentality, that casts the world into a drama of enemies and threats and lies a debased view of human nature. When you see humans as fundamentally selfish and whole nations as fundamentally evil, then all you have available to change their behavior is threats and bribes. Peace comes from a different place. It starts by seeing within others and within ourselves that which is not selfish, but is brave and generous and idealistic and has good intentions. And I'm not saying that we should ignore the base elements of human nature or the dangers of the world. But if that's all that we see, and we're going to be stuck forever in the mentality of war. And that's where the military-industrial complex wants to keep us. And we will reap forever its poisonous fruits. To chart a course for the future of our nation's military and foreign policy, I'll return once again to the words of John F. Kennedy. He said, quote, "America's weapons are not provocative. They are carefully controlled. They are designed to deter and capable of selective use. Our military forces are committed to peace."
Which, that's no longer the case anymore. I mean, come on. 2001, it's knocking at the door. It's been ongoing like this, and it's what it's been now. 22 years. 22 years now of unending forever war.
and disciplined in self-restraint. Our diplomats are instructed to avoid unnecessary irritants and purely rhetorical hostility. End quote. The current administration is going to be in power for another year and a half, but the danger of reckless escalation and nuclear brinksmanship is real and present. I therefore call on our present leadership to adopt President Kennedy's maxims and to start de-escalating right now. I call on them to fulfill John F. Kennedy's declaration. I call on the military establishment to exercise disciplined self-restraint. I call upon the State Department to avoid unnecessary irritants and hostile rhetoric.
That's not going to happen. And now I do hope that RFK Jr. has a very safe and successful campaign. Now, he recently said on Joe Rogan's show that he is worried about his safety. So if you don't know what happened to JFK and RFK Sr., open up a history book. Spoiler alert, it's not good. It's not good. It's not good at all. But this is the world we live in. Also, many members within his own political party are in deep with the military-industrial complex. The only way things are going to change is if, again, people start building movements and organizations not connected to Washington, D.C. We should have been doing this since 2016. Everybody across the political spectrum. Now, I have no idea whether or not RFK Jr. will really follow through because, again, any presidential candidate can say things you want to hear and you could respect. I respect these words that RFK Jr. is saying. I respect the words that Dr. Cornel West is saying, especially in regards to peace and ending the military-industrial complex. And I'll go a step further. I will tip my hat and respect the words of Donald Trump saying, "I want people to stop dying." But it's one thing to say these words. Actions and deeds need to take place first. Words and statements have been done over and over again, and we've seen our oh-so-fantastic politicians on the left and on the right say things that their constituents like to hear. Write those posts on social media. The posts that we all like to click and like and share and retweet and say, "Oh, my favorite politician is saying something I agree with." Follow through is key. Being consistent is key. I hope that a potential RFK Jr. administration, whatever that looks like, will actually do that follow through. It is far more corrupt than people realize. And when you find out that your U.S. politicians, your U.S. senators can be bought for a measly $10,000, that's a rather kind of scary.
And here's the most important thing of all. I call on every American to join in a new peace movement, to make your voices heard, to reject the insanity of escalation, and to celebrate no longer the wartime president, but a president who keeps the peace. And to what kind of peace do I refer? I'll end with one more piece of wisdom from my uncle. Quote, "What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not a peace of the grave or the security of a slave. I'm talking about a genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables people and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely a peace for all men and women, but not merely a peace for our time, but a peace for all time." Thank you all very much.
Words I agree with. Follow through is key. Now, I do know that RFK Jr. will be having a town hall with News Nation on June 28th. I will be definitely trying to check that out and see what questions will be asked. I think this will be his first town hall, save for his Twitter Space event that was hosted by Elon Musk. So it's good to see this. But however, even now as we speak, all of corporate media is amping up its smear campaigns towards RFK Jr. and the fact that he has quite a strong amount of support amongst Democratic voters. In my personal opinion, I believe that number will keep on rising up as the Marianne Williamson campaign continues to, run out of steam. And there's no way that that train is going to keep on moving forward. But as you talk about calling out the military industrial complex, I want everyone to remember those first two videos that I played. 6.2 billion goes missing. That's not the first time that's happened in the Pentagon. Second, that little video segment from James O'Keefe, whether you like him or respect him, that video segment pretty much said the quiet part loud. That's happening all the time, that a lot of diehard Republican voters and diehard Democratic voters refuse to acknowledge. Your politicians profit off of war and suffering. They're cheap and easy, and they're not going to fight for you. I hope this election cycle wakes people up. It's time to break the system, because now more than ever, we need to fight for a better future, because if not, there will be no world left.